Earned this moment, the elders approach with their bowls of marking mud. The ceremony begins, runs over water, straightens his spine, feeling the weight of tradition and expectation settle over him like a second skin. Today, he becomes a true hunter, or he joins his clutch mates in the spirit realm. There is no middle ground. The fog coils around his feet, as thick as ever. Somewhere out there, his quarry waits, runs over water's claws, flecks against the earth, ready to begin the hunt that will define his life. The eternal mists of the swampland, churned, disturbed by an unseen force from above. Wind whipped through the uppermost branches of the wetwood trees, stripping leaves and sending ripples across the surface of countless ponds. The very air seemed to compress, as if some great weight pressed down upon it. A sound cut through the constant drip of water and rustle of leaves, a deep thrum that made the ground tremble. Small creatures fled their burrows, darting between roots and splashing through shallow water. Even the largest predators retreated deeper into the swamp, sensing something that alarmed their instincts. The disturbance centered on a relatively dry patch of ground where ancient trees had fallen to create a natural clearing. The fog there began to spiral, drawn upward in a perfect cone that pierced the low-hanging clouds. Drops of water suspended in the air, caught in some invisible field that denied the pull of the earth. Then came the heat. It rolled outward in waves, instantly evaporating the suspended droplets and creating brief gaps in the eternal fog. These holes in the mist revealed fleeting glimpses of something massive settling into the clearing, something that caught what little light penetrated the canopy and bent it wrong. The thrumming ceased, the wind died. The fog began to settle back into its natural patterns, flowing around a shape that displaced it without being truly visible. Only the closest observation would reveal a subtle distortion. Like looking through clear water, a seam appeared in the air itself, extending from top to bottom. Light spilled out, not the diffuse glow of day or the warm flicker of fire, but a sharp white radiance that cast no shadows. The scene widened, becoming a doorway that opened onto nothing. A figure emerged, tall, broader than any swamp dweller, covered in plates that gleamed like sun on still water. Its head was smooth and round, with no snout or scales, featuring a dark panel where eyes should be. It moved with deliberate grace, each step placing its flat feet precisely despite the treacherous ground. The fig paused at the base of its invisible vessel, lifting one arm to examine something attached to its forearm. Lights played across the surface of its armor, and sounds emerged that had no place in nature, sharp tones and clicks that carried through the mist. The device on its arm projected patterns into the air, shapes that twisted and moved like living things, but remained flat and transparent. The figure studied these phantom images, occasionally reaching out to touch and manipulate them with armored fingers. Satisfied, it pressed something on its chest. The effect was immediate and absolute. The figure simply ceased to exist. No flash, no fade, just absence. Only the slightest ripple in the fog revealed its movement. Away from the clearing, the vessel followed suit, its distortion vanishing completely. The seam of light sealed itself. The mist reclaimed the space as if nothing had disturbed it, but the swamp had changed. Ancient patterns of predator and prey, hunter and hunted, had been disrupted by the arrival of something entirely new. A new hunter had entered these lands, one that walked without sound, killed without touching, and saw without being seen. The fog that sheltered all life here meant nothing to it. The rules that governed survival in this harsh realm did not apply. The hunt had begun, but the hunter was not seeking mere survival. This was not about food or territory or proving worth to the tribe. This hunter sought something else, a prize, a trophy, proof of prowess on a scale that spanned the stars themselves. Somewhere in the swamp, a fog claw marked its territory with razor-sharp claws, unaware that it had become prey to something far deadlier than itself. The eternal cycle of the swamp was about to be broken. The 12 hunters to be stand in a line before the speaking stone, their tails held rigid with anticipation. Runs over water, feels the cold mud of the ground between his toe claws, grounding himself in this moment. The fog wraps around them, all turning his fellow hunters into shadows at the edge of sight. Elder stone voice approaches first, his ancient scales worn smooth by countless seasons. The shallow bowl in his hands contains mud from the deepest part of the swamp where the bottom cannot be touched even by the longest spear. This is the mud that remembers, that holds the weight of every hunt since the first people came to these waters. This fog gives life. Stone voice speaks his throat pouch, vibrating with the traditional words. The fog takes life. We who hunt within it must know both truths. He stops before the first hunter in line. The mud in his bowl shifts color as he stirs it, not the dull brown of ordinary earth, but deep blues and greens, drawn from secret plants known only to the elders. His fingers move with practiced grace, painting symbols across the hunter's face scales. Each mark holds meaning passed down through generations. The spiral above the eyes grants keen sight through the mist. The slash across the throat warns against calling out unwisely. The dots along the jaw remind that patience brings prey within reach. One by one, the hunters receive their marks. Runs over water watches their reactions. Some tremble slightly, others stand unnaturally still. All feel the weight of what comes next. Not everyone returns from the fog hunt. Even success often carries the price of scars or lost claws. When Stone voice reaches him, runs over water, meets the elders, gazed steadily. The old one's eyes hold neither encouragement nor doubt. This is simply what must be. The cool mud touches his scales and runs over water, forces himself to breathe evenly as ancient symbols take shape across his face. More elders step forward, each carrying their own bowls of sacred mud. They work in silence, adding layers of meaning to the hunter's scales. Dark red for blood that may be shed, yellow white for the fog itself, black for the shadow of death that walks these lands. Through it all, the fog hunt song rises from the gathered tribe. No words, only the deep, deep thrumming that comes from their throat pouches, passed from hunter to hunter since the first ones learned it from the swamp itself. The sound settles into runs over water's bones, reminding him that he is part of something older and larger than himself. The song speaks of fog that swallows warriors whole, of claws that cut through stone, of eyes that shine in darkness, and teeth that break spears. It tells of hunters who track the great beasts and live to mark their scales with pride. It remembers those who went into the mist and never returned. The marking ritual ends, the song fades. Stone voice speaks again. You go forth as children of the tribe, return as hunters, or return to the mud from which we all came. The fog will judge your worth. The gathered tribe parts, creating 12 paths leading away from the speaking stone. Each hunter will take a different direction so that none may help another. Some hesitate, adjusting spears or checking bow strings one final time. Others stride forward immediately, eager to begin. Runs over water, remains still, feeling the weight of the mud on his scales. The marks are not yet dry. They will harden throughout the hunt, becoming permanent only if he survives. His tail twitches, eager to move, but he forces himself to wait. A true hunter knows that the first step determines all that followed. He touches his chest, where fast, like streams, luck tooth hangs on a strand of braided vine. Beside it, a smooth black stone that sharp tooth once found. His clutch mates travel with him in spirit, if not in body. There their strength joins with his. The fog beckons, runs over water, chooses his path, and moves forward, letting the mist swallow him. The village vanishes behind him. The hunt begins. Runs over water, reads the swamp like elders read the patterns in smoke. Each sign builds upon the lost, telling stories of life and death in the mist. Here a broken reed where a marsh deer drank at dawn. There the smooth groove and mud where a water serpent slid past. The swamp speaks to those who know its language. He moves between the wetwood trees, his feet finding the hidden paths that generations of hunters have used. The truly skilled never break new ground. They step where others have stepped, adding their weight to ancient tracks until they become solid ground. Father taught him to recognize these paths by the subtle differences in the mud's color, by the way certain plants grow. Along their edges, a cluster of bright purple fungi catches his eye. Spine caps, named for the tiny needles that ring their edges where they grow. The ground is always firm enough to hold weight. Their spores attract thumb-sized buzz flies, which in turn draw the small lizards that fog claws hunt for sport rather than food. The trees here grow with their roots exposed, creating archways and hollows beneath their massive trunks. Dark water pools in these spaces home to the fierce snapjaws that can take a hunter's foot if they step unwisely, but runs over water knows their signs, the particular way they stir up mud, the remains of their meals, floating at the edges of their pools. He pauses at one such pool, crouching to examine tracks in the soft earth beside it, 3-toe prints larger than his hand, a marsh deer, but not the common kind. This was a fog runner, the larger breed that lives in deeper swamp. Their meat is rich with fat, making them prime targets for fog claws. The tracks lead onward, but runs over water's attention shifts to the trees themselves. The fog runner passed recently, yet the hair vines hanging from the branches haven't moved. The tiny white flowers that grow on these vines clothe. At the slightest disturbance, their stillness means nothing large has passed beneath them. The fog runner path vanishes as if the creature simply ceased to exist, but runs over water, sees the truth, signs of struggle in the mud marks where claws bigger than his forearm rack the earth. The fog runner's last moments written in scattered scales and spatters of blood. This is how fog claws hunt. They strike from above using the low branches as launching points. Their white scales blend with the mist, making them nearly invisible until the moment they spring. The fog runner never saw death coming. A sound draws his attention, the deep croaking of a throat singer, one of the massive birds that nest in the highest branches. They call to warn others when predators pass beneath their nests. 3 distinct calls ring out, each from a different direction. The fog claw is on the move, runs over water, studies the remains of its meal. The carcass has been dragged away, but he doesn't follow immediately. First, he must know this fog claw's habits. The spacing of its claw marks tell him its size, larger than average but not yet fully grown. The depth of its prints reveals its weight. The pattern of its feeding shows its preferences. The fog shifts around him as he works, revealing and concealing different aspects of the scene. He finds shed scales caught in tree bark, confirming the creature's coloring, pale as morning mist with a faint golden tinge that marks a female. Females are smaller than males, but faster and more cunning. Something catches his eye, a mark in the bark that doesn't match the others. The spacing is wrong, the angle unfamiliar. This fog claw is not alone in its turd tree. The thought brings his hand to his spear. 2 fog claws in one space means either mating season has begun early or something has driven one from its usual hunting grounds. He touches the mud of the kill site, testing its temperature against his scales. Still cool. The kill is fresh, but not so fresh that the hunter will be sleeping nearby. Following now would be safe if he moves carefully. The fog claw will be settling into its digestion sleep, making it easier to track. The trail leads deeper into the swamp where the trees grow closer and the fog thickens until he can barely see the length of his spear. This is proper fog claw territory. Few hunters ever return from these depths, but that is exactly why runs over water must go. The greatest prizes carry the greatest risks. He checks his weapons one final time, then moves forward. The swamp seems to hold its breath around him. Even the small sounds of insects and tree climbers have gone quiet. Somewhere ahead his quarry waits, but first he must understand why it has strayed from its normal patterns. A hunter who doesn't question the unusual soon joins the ancestors. The swamp's eternal rhythm, faltered water droplets in the fog swirled against their natural pattern, drawn aside by an unseen presence moving through the mist. Tiny ripples spread across still pools where nothing visible had disturbed their surface. The very air seemed to bend, creating subtle distortions that vanished when viewed directly. Tree climbers froze on their branches, sensing something their instincts couldn't categorize. A throat singer went silent, mid all its warning dying in its throat. Even the buzzflies changed their flight patterns, spiraling away from empty air, as if avoiding an invisible obstacle. The presence paused at the sight of violence here. The mud still held the story of death, scattered scales, torn reeds, blood mixing with dark water. The fog parted briefly around a shape that wasn't there, revealing details of the scene that nature alone would have hidden. A broken claw lay half buried in the mud. It rose into the air of its own accord, water streaming from its surface, light played across it from no apparent source, casting strange patterns that traced its curves and edges. The claw Rotated slowly, examined from every angle by unseen eyes, more lights appeared. Forming flat shapes in the air, they showed the claw from different perspectives, marking its dimensions with precise lines that hung in space. Numbers and symbols flickered beside these phantom images, their meaning inscrutable to any creature of the swamp. The claw descended back to the mud, settling exactly where it had laid. Not a grain of soil was disturbed by its movement. The presence shifted, studying other signs. Marks appeared in the air, where they traced the spacing of footprints, the angle of killing blows, the pattern of the creature's movement. A throat singer called again, its deep note cutting through the fog. The presence went still. The phantom lights vanished. Even the subtle distortion of its form seemed to fade, becoming truly invisible rather than merely hidden. 3 more throat singers took up the call, their voices creating a map of movement through the canopy. Their warnings tracked something large moving through the upper branches, following paths that only the swamp's greatest warriors could navigate. Presence moved again, but differently now. Its passage left no ripples in the pools. The fog no longer swirled around it. Only the smallest signs betrayed its movement. A single drop of water falling from a disturbed leaf, the faintest impression in soft mud. The subtle shift of a hanging vine. It passed beneath a cluster of spine caps, but their needles didn't react to its presence. It crossed a snap-jaws pool without drawing the creature's attention. Every step fell exactly where it would leave the least trace, as if guided by perfect knowledge of the terrain. A sound cut through the swamp's ambient noise, the snap of a branch high above, followed by the distinctive scrape of scales against bark. The presence stopped. Phantom lights appeared again, reaching upward to paint the branches with invisible fire. They revealed what even the keenest natural eyes would miss, the white scales of a predator moving through the canopy. The lights vanished. The presence moved forward with new purpose, following the path of its quarry. But it wasn't tracking like a hunter following prey. Its movements were too precise, too measured. This was a predator, moving to cut off its target's escape. More sounds echoed through the fog. The heavy impact of something large landing on a branch, the scrape of claws marking territory, the low hiss of a challenge display. The fog claw was establishing its dominance over new hunting grounds. It didn't know it was being hunted. The presence split the fog like a blade as it moved, heading toward the source of these sounds it carried with it something foreign to the swamp's ancient patterns. This was not the patient stalking of a natural hunter or the desperate pursuit of prey. Calculation, purpose, methodical execution. The fog claw's destiny had been decided by forces it couldn't comprehend, guided by rules it would never know. Its role in the eternal cycle of predator and prey irreversibly disrupted by something outside that cycle entirely, runs over water scales. Prickle with unease, the fog claw trail winds through a swamp in ways that defy everything he knows of their habits. They are creatures of pattern, of territory. They claim their hunting grounds and defend them until death, yet this one moves like prey, not predator. He pauses to study another set of marks. The fog claw's claws had scored deep into a wet wood's trunk, but not in the usual pattern of territorial claims. These cuts are frantic, carved in haste. The spacing is wrong, too close together, as if the creature struck in fear rather than dominance. The trail itself troubles him more with each step. Fog claws are masters of the space between water and sky, moving through upper branches where their weight bends limbs that would snap under lesser hunters. They descend only to kill or to sleep. But this one keeps returning to the ground, leaving prints in mud where no fog claw should walk. He finds another kill site, fresher than the first, a young marsh deer, barely more than a fa. Its death makes no sense. Fog claws hunt the largest prey they can find, taking pride in bringing down the most dangerous targets. They never waste energy on such small meals. Unless desperate, the carcass tells an even stranger story. Fog claws are meticulous feeders, taking only the richest meat and leaving the rest in specific patterns that mark their status. This kill has been torn apart without purpose or pride. Meat lies wasted in the mud, not even properly tasted. Runs over water, touches his luck tokens, seeking wisdom from his clutch mate spirits. Has he somehow tracked a sick hunter? But no, the prints show no sign of weakness or injury. The fog claw moves with its full strength. Something else drives it to break its nature. He studies the mud around the kill, reading the sequence of events. The fog claw approached from directly above. As always, the deer died quickly, efficiently. But then the pattern changes. The fog claw's prints show it spinning, slashing at empty air, fighting something that left no tracks of its own. The ground here feels wrong beneath his feet. The mud has been disturbed in ways he cannot explain. As if walked upon by something his eyes refuse to see, even the fog behaves strangely, swirling in currents that no wind could create. A throat singer calls from ahead, the warning cry that signals a hunter in its territory. Two more answer from different directions, their voices overlapping. Runs over water's hand tightens on his spear. The voices create a map in his mind, showing the fog claw's position. It moves fast, faster than he's ever known one to travel, but the calls make no sense. They track the fog claw's movement in a wide circle, passing through 3 different territories. No fog claw would dare cross so many boundaries. Each crossing risks death from the territory's rightful owner. Even in mating season, they respect these ancient lines. He finds signs of battle scales scattered across broken reeds, blood on bark, deep claw marks in wood and earth. The fog claw fought another of its kind here, but the fight's pattern is all wrong. There was no ritual display, no careful testing of strength, just desperate violence, as if neither hunter cared about anything but survival. More blood leads away from the battle site. His quarry fled after the fight, something no healthy fog claw would ever do. They fight to the death over territory. Retreat brings shame worse than death, yet this one fled without even trying to save its pride. A new sound ripples through the fog claw's hunting cry, but it carries notes, runs over water, has never heard before. Not the confident call of an apex hunter, but something sharp with fear. It calls again, closer now, moving toward him far too quickly. The mud between his toes holds traces of warmth that shouldn't exist, residual heat that fades even as he feels it. The fog parts and seals in ways that cannot be natural. All his instincts scream of wrongness. The very patterns of the swamp have been disrupted by something that should not be. He has driven himself too deep. Followed signs he should have recognized as warnings rather than trail marks. No hunter has ever returned from this far into fog CLA territory. Perhaps now he understands why something walks these depths that even the great hunters fear. The father claw cries out again, so close now that the sound shakes water from the leaves above, but runs over water's attention fixes on the fog itself, on the way it moves against every pattern he has known since his egg cracked. Something else hunts here, something that cares not for the laws of the swamp. Movement catches, runs over water's eye, a ripple of white scales through the fog. His body reacts before his mind can process, the sight muscles tensing to leap aside, but he knows already it's too late. No one survives a fog claw's ambush once they've seen the scales. Time slows as his hunter's mind catalogues every detail. The fog claw's form emerges from the mist as if born from it. Massive female, but larger than any he's ever seen. Her scales hold the perfect white of morning fog, marred only by fresh scratches that tell of recent battle. Her eyes lock onto his black pupils wide with fear, not hunger. This is wrong. Fog claws never show fear. Their eyes should be narrow with confidence, calculating the kill, but these eyes hold something he's never seen in an apex hunter or terror. None of this matters. Her claws extend, each longer than his forearm. Her muscles bunch for the killing leap. The distance between them is less than a spear's length. His weapons will be useless at this range. Even if he could raise them in time, her scales would turn aside any blow he could strike. Runs over water, feels a strange peace settle over him. This is how many hunters meet their end, their last sight. The perfect killing form of the swamp's greatest predator. His only regret is that he won't return to tell the tribe of the strange things he's seen, of how the patterns have been broken. A sound tears through the fog, sharp as breaking stone, loud as skyfire. The air itself seems to split, light flares brighter than the sun. The fog claw's leap transforms into a sprawl as something strikes her side with impossible force. She crashes through a stand of reeds, her tail thrashing. Blood runs down her scales, not the dark brown of a spear wound or the ragged red of claw mar, but a perfect round hole that pulses with dying light. She screams. The sound carries none of a Hun's rage only. Primal fear. The fog claw scrambles up, movements jerky. With panic her claws rip gouges in the earth as she launches herself away, abandoning any pretense of pride or power. She moves with pure instinct now, using her full speed to escape something even she cannot fight. Runs over water, stands frozen, his breath caught in his throat. The light came from behind him, slowly, so slowly he turns toward its source. The fog swirls and dances, carrying the scent of storm. Fire heat radiates from empty air, making the water droplets dance and swirl. Something moves through that empty space. The fog parts around a form he cannot see. Mud depresses beneath feet that leave no prints. The very air seems to bend, creating patterns that his eyes refuse to understand. His throat pouch swells with instinctive warning calls, but he forces them still. Every scale on his body screams at him to flee, to run until his legs give out. But he is a hunter. Hunters do not flee from what they don't understand. They observe, they learn. The unseen thing moves with perfect grace, each step falling exactly where it will leave the least trace. It passes close enough that runs over water, feels heat radiating from it like standing next to a cooking fire. His nose fills with scents he has no words for. Then it is gone, following the fog claw's trail into deeper swamp. The fog settles back into its natural path patterns. The strange heat fades, even the scents disperse, leaving only the familiar smells of mud and water, if not for the blood-marked hole in a nearby tree where the fog claw's once splashed. He could almost believe he had imagined everything, but hunters do not imagine. They see what is not, what should be. He was right. Something walks these swamps that does not follow the ancient laws. Something that can strike like skyfire and cannot be seen by the eye. Something that can make even a fog claw flee in terror. His hunt has changed. He is no longer the hunter seeking prey now. He must understand what force has invaded his swamp, what power can turn the greatest of predators into frightened prey. The marks of the ritual still dry on his scales, reminding him of his duty to the tribe. Carefully, silently runs over water, begins to track the impossible thing that saved his life. Perhaps this is why so few returned from the fog hunt. Perhaps they all found something beyond their understanding and followed it into mystery. Following a thing that leaves no track. Tests every skill, runs over water, has learned since he first gripped a spear. The invisible hunter moves like nothing he has ever tracked, yet the swamp cannot hide its passage. He reads its trail in the absence of signs here, a patch of mud too smooth, as if something swept away all trace of its crossing. There a scatter of water drops hanging in still air where fog should flow naturally. The very emptiness speaks to his hunter's senses, showing him where his quarry has passed. His feet find strange warmth lingering in certain spots, heat that cannot exist in the cool swamp. The spine caps react to nothing, their needles turning to track an unseen presence. Even the snap jaws sense something, their scaled heads following empty air. The trail leads deeper into the swamp than runs over water has ever ventured. The trees press closer here, their roots forming a maze of arches and hollows. The fog thickens until he can barely see the length of his own tail. This is the domain of legend, where the first hunters fought the greatest beasts. He finds more signs of the fog claws passing, broken reeds, scattered scales, blood droplets that still pulse with dying light. The great hunter flees without care or stealth or dignity, but the thing pursuing it moves with deliberate precision, each step placed with perfect care. A throat singer sounds its warning call, but cuts off mid-cry. Another begins to call and falls silent just as quickly. The strange hunter moves faster now, climbing to the higher branches without disturbing a single leaf. Runs over water, follows more slowly, testing each branch before trusting it with his weight. The canopy reveals more of the fog claw's terror. Deep claw marks score the bark where panic made it slip. Broken branches show where it moved too quickly, not taking time to test its path. It behaves like a marsh deer fleeing death, not the apex hunter. It should be something drops from above, a scale from the fog claws hide scratched by combat with another of its kind. But this close runs over water, sees details his eyes missed before. The marking pattern is wrong. These scales come from near the fog claw's throat, where no rival's claws could reach, as if something grabbed it by the neck. He studies the scale's edge through a hunter's eye. The scratches don't match any claw or fat. He knows they form perfect straight lines, too precise to be natural. His fingers trace the marks, feeling their unnatural smoothness. Even the sharpest stone tools cannot cut with such exactness. The fog shifts again, drawing his attention forward. The unseen hunter moves with new purpose, as if sensing its prey's weakness. Runs over water, follows with equal care. But his quarry's trail grows harder to reach. It seems to learn the swamp's ways. As it moves, leaving fewer traces with each step, he finds himself moving through fog that parts before him, still disturbed by his quarry's passage. The droplets spiral in impossible patterns, flowing against the pull of the earth. Heat lingers in the air, carrying scents that make his nose itch with their strangeness. A sound reaches him, the fog claw's cry of challenge, but filled with desperation rather than dominance. It comes from ahead, where the canopy opens into a small clearing. The strange hunter's trail leads straight toward it, moving with deadly purpose. Runs over water, touches his luck tokens, feeling their familiar shapes. He has tracked this thing far beyond the normal boundaries of the fog hunt. The fog ahead begins to glow with that impossible light. His quarry prepares to strike again. Runs over water, moves forward with the utmost care, determined to witness whatever happens next. His tribe must know what power has entered their ancient hunting grounds. He has become the witness to a hunt greater than any in the tribe's stories. The fog claw's fate is sealed. He sees that now his only task is to observe and survive, to carry this knowledge back to his people. But first he must understand what manner of hunter can turn the swamp's greatest predator into prey. The trail vanishes, not gradually as tracks fade into hard ground or water, but completely. One moment runs over water, reads the signs of passage in disturbed fog and lingering heat. The next, nothing, as if the hunter simply ceased to exist. He circles the last sign, a patch of mud still warm to his toe claws. The ground beyond holds no trace of passage. The fog flows in natural patterns. Even the strange scents have disappeared. He searches wider, tasting the air with his throat pouch, but finds nothing. His quarry has done what no natural thing could do, broken the swamp's web of signs and traces. Even the wind leaves marks for a skilled hunter to follow, but this thing has learned to move without disturbing so much as a water droplet. The sharp sound splits the air again, closer than before. Runs over waters. Head snaps toward it, every scale tingling. Another sound follows the fog. Claws shriek of pain. He moves toward the noise, no longer trying to track, simply pursuing the chaos of combat. He finds the scene in a small clearing ringed by ancient wetwood trees. The fog thins here, stirred by the violent movement of the fog claw as it thrashes against empty air. Blood runs from two perfect holes in its side, each wound glowing with dying embers of that impossible light. Then the hunter appears. The thing that steps out of nothing stands taller than any being. Runs over water, has ever seen. Its form suggests 2 legs and 2 arms like his own people, but their all similarity ends. No scales cover its body. Instead, it wears a second skin of material that sheathes like water but moves like living flesh. Its head is long, round, and smooth, with no snout or throat pouch. Where eyes should be, a dark panel reflects the fog. Claw's thrashing form runs over water, cannot tell if the thing truly sees through this strange face, or if it is merely a mask hiding something even stranger. It moves with perfect grace despite its size, each step placed with precise care. One arm extends, holding something that can only be a weapon. The object's shape defies his understanding, all straight lines and sharp angles, no part of it grown or carved from natural materials. The fog claw sees it too. The great hunter backs away, its white scales stained with blood and mud. Its tail strikes a tree hard enough to crack bark, but it seems not to notice. Those black eyes fix on the strange hunter with pure animal terror. The thing speaks, the sound makes. Runs over water, scales crawl, not words in any language he knows, but something deeper and more complex, clicks and tones that no throat could produce naturally. The fog claw responds with a desperate hiss, spreading its claws in a threat. Display light flares from the thing's other arm, Not the killing light of its weapon, but flat shapes hanging in the air. They show the fog claw's form in perfect detail, every scale and claw, rendered in glowing lines, numbers, and symbols orbit these phantom images, their meaning impossible to grasp. The thing studies these lights, head tilting slightly, its free hand moves through them, rearranging their patterns. The fog claw sees an opportunity and lunges, claws extended for a killing blow, but the strange hunter simply steps aside. Movement so precise, it seems to flow around the attack. The weapon comes up, light gathers at its tip. The fog claw realizes its mistake, too late, trying to turn its lunge into retreat. The sound comes again, sharp as breaking stone. Light pierces the fog claw's movement becomes a graceless sprawl. As new wounds appear in its chest, runs over water, watches in stunned silence as the greatest hunter he has ever known dies, not in ritual combat with its own kind, not bringing down mighty prey, but reduced to a mere trophy. For something beyond his understanding, the strange hunter moves to the fallen fog claw weapon still ready. More lights appear around its arm. Scanning the corpse, that alien voice speaks again, satisfaction clear even in its unnatural tones. The thing reaches down with its free hand, fingers tracing the fog claw's scales with almost gentle curiosity. Runs over water, should feel triumph. The fog claw that nearly killed him lies dead by the trib's laws. He could claim this as his kill and complete his trial, but he feels only awareness of how fragile his people's laws suddenly seem, how small their understanding of what walks in their swamp. The strange hunter works with methodical precision. Its weapon disappears into its second skin as it kneels beside the fog claw. Those armored hands move across the corpse with practiced ease, examining each wound, testing the flexibility of each joint. Like a hunter assessing the quality of prey, more lights spring from its arm. Surrounding the fog claw's body, the phantom images shift and change, showing the creature from every angle. New marks appear in these glowing pictures, straight lines dividing the fog claw into sections, marking where scales meet. Flesh, the thing produces new tools from its skin, each more mysterious than the last. They gleam like water in sunlight, their edges too perfect to be natural. It begins to work on the fog claw's body, with these implements, movements precise as a master craftsman. Runs over water, watches in fascination as the hunter divides the flesh with impossible skill. No cut bleeds, no scale chips. The fog claw's body separates along invisible lines, coming apart like pottery from the shaping fires. This is not the butchery of hunger, but something else, something ritual. The strange hunter sets aside several choice cuts of meat, the flesh perfectly separated from bone and scale from its skin. It produces a small device that flares with controlled fire, hot enough to make the air shimmer. Runs over water, watches in fascination as it carefully sears the meat, the scent of cooking flesh, unlike anything he has known. Its hands move to its face. There is a soft hiss, and the smooth dark panel lifts away. Runs over water's throat, power constricts and shock at what lies beneath. The creature's true face is pale and flat, with small eyes and a mouth full of blunt teeth. It looks soft, vulnerable, nothing like the deadly predator that brought down a fog claw. Yet as runs over water, watches, it tests the cooked meat with strange implements, then lifts a perfectly browned piece to those strange teeth and begins to eat. No hunter in the history of his tribe has ever consumed fog claw flesh. Their meat is considered too dangerous, too powerful. Even touching it with bare scales can raise painful welts, yet this being devours it with evident pleasure, making sounds of satisfaction as it chews. Its blunt teeth tear through the meat that could crack a stone spear, now made tender by the fire's touch. When it finishes eating, it carefully extinguishes the flame and stows both the device and its eating implements. Back within its skin, it replaces its face panel with another soft hiss. The strange hunter's attention then fixes on the fog claw's head. Its fingers trace the curve of the jaw, the shape of the A ridge. More lights appear, showing other creatures. Runs over water, has never seen beasts with teeth and claws that dwarf even the fog claw's weapons. Each image bears the same angular mark beside it. Like a broken branch, understanding floods through him. This is not about food or territory or proving worth to the tribe. This hunter seeks trophies, proof of its victory over the greatest killers it can find. The fog claw is just one more mark in its record, one more triumph to add to its collection. The thing speaks again, those clicking tones carrying satisfaction. The lights change, showing the new beast runs over water. Scales tighten at the sight. The creature in the phantom image towers over everything around it, its form, a mass of teeth and armored plates. Even in this flat rendering of light, it radiates menace. This is the hunter's next prey. The fog claw was merely a step on its path to greater challenges. It moves through the swamp like a shadow, not out of fear or stealth, but because the swamp itself means nothing to it. This is not its hunting ground, just a temporary stop in an endless quest. The strange hunter stands gathering its tools back into its skin. The lights vanish. It moves to lift. The fog claws remains now perfectly preserved by whatever ritual it performed. The body rises from the ground, as if weightless. Then the hunter simply ceases to exist. No fade, no warning. One moment, it stands in the clearing with its prize. The next, only empty air remains. Even the fog shows no sign of its passage, as if it never existed at all. Runs over water, remains still long after it vanishes. His mind racing, he could return to the tribe. Now could claim the fog claw's death as his own. Kill. The blood on the ground and marks on the trees would support his story. He would earn his final marks, be declared a true hunter. But that would be a lie, not just about the kill, but about everything the tribe believes about their place in the swamp's order, about what truly walks in the deep fog, about how small they are in a world that holds things like that. Hunter, his claws brush the luck tokens at his chest. What would his clutch mates do? Fast like Stream would want to tell everyone, to shout the truth from the speaking stone. Sharptooth would seek to understand it, to learn its ways. But neither of them survived to become hunters. Runs over water as a hunter. He knows that some truths are too heavy for the tribe to bear. The fog gives life. The fog takes life. That is enough for them to know. Let them believe the deep swamp holds only natural dangers. Let them trust in their spears and their strength. He turns away from the clearing, choosing a path that will lead him to another fog claw territory. His hunt is not complete, not truly. He will earn his marks honestly, or not at all, but he will carry this knowledge within him, a secret as invisible as that strange hunter. The fog welcomes him back, familiar and unchanging, but now he moves through it with new awareness. Somewhere out there, the hunter continues its quest for worthy prey. Runs over water, hopes it finds what it seeks far from his swamp. Some truths are better left in darkness, hidden by the eternal mist. Welcome to Sci-Fi Virtue. My name is Chandy, and I'll be your narrator today. But before we get into today's story, please quickly check below to see if you've subscribed to the channel. It's 100% free, and it just helps make sure that our videos pop up in your feed more often. Dawn breaks with no sun. The thick mist clings to Runs over water scales as he emerges from his sleeping hollow, just as it has every morning since his egg cracked. This fog is life. It shelters, it teaches. Today it will test. The sleeping hollow sits nestled within the great roots of an ancient wetwood, its entrance woven from marsh reeds and sealed with dried mud inside. The walls curve smooth from generations of scaled bodies resting against them. 3 depressions worn into the packed earth floor mark where Runs over waterer and his clutch mates once huddled together through countless nights. Now he sleeps alone, fast like stream felled to fever. 2 seasons past. Sharptooth ventured too far into deep water during last season's flood. Both joined the ancestors before their time, but Runs over water endured, and today he will prove his worth. He retrieves his spear from its rack, smooth hardwood, tipped with a careful L-napped stone point fletched with 4 finger-length feathers from a marsh hoop. The weapon represents 3 full seasons of learning and crafting under father's guidance. Every groove in the shaft bears the memory of some lesson: how to find the straight of saplings, how to cure the wood without cracking, how to bind the point so it stays true on impact but breaks free if stuck in prey. The bow comes next, unstrung until needed. The process of stringing it has become as natural as breathing. Legs braced against the curved arms, pulling with precise pressure. Fingers working the treated vine into its notches. Father always said a hunter must know his tools as intimately as his own tail outside the village stirs to life. Smoke rises from cooking fires carrying the scent of roasting marsh grubs, and steaming root paste the elders gather by. The speaking stone their scales, dull with age, but their eyes still sharp young ones dart between. The shelters playing chase and pounce, practicing the instincts that will one day make them hunters. Runs over water's throat pouch, swells with pride as he passes them. He was just like them not long ago, but season by season, trial by trial, he has proven himself ready for more. First came the swimming trial, crossing the deep water where the bottom drops away into darkness, then tracking, following father's trail through the swamp for 3 days with no food. The spear trial, bringing down 3 marsh deer in as many days. The bow trial, hitting flying targets while balanced on floating logs. Each victory earned him a new marking, patterns of colored mud worked into his scales by the elders' skilled hands. Together they tell his story here. The rippling lines of a strong swimmer, there the sharp angles of a shot. Today he will earn the greatest marking of all if the ancestors favor him. The fog hunt, the final trial to track and kill a fog claw, the deadliest hunter in all the swamps. Their claws slice through hardwood like water, their scales blend with the mist until they seem made of fog themselves. They strike without warning and vanish just as quickly. Even father speaks of them with deep respect, touching his luck tokens whenever their calls echo through the mist. Runs over water, has seen their work, deer torn apart with surgical precision, other predators left in pieces, even young hunters who grew too confident. But he has also studied them since he could first grip a spear. He knows their habits, their territories, their preferred hunting grounds. He has helped father track them, watch them from hiding, learned their ways. The village gathering space fills as other young hunters emerge from their hollows. All have passed the earlier trials, but runs over water knows he has trained harder than any of them. His tools are perfectly maintained, his skills honed through countless practice hours. He has